Faster than a struggling turtle. More powerful than Gary Rosen.
Oh, I can't believe that.
Able to leap tall juggalos in a single bound. Look, down on the ground. It's a germ. It's a worm. It's 508. Bursting from the subterranean depths of Wormtown like the mighty Shai Halud, it's 508, a show about Worcester. Brendan Milliken, your greatest nightmare come to pass.
Hey, I totally forgot about that intro, Mike. Thanks for
Bringing back the intro.
Yeah.
It's a brand new year, and it's just exactly the same intro. It's not
Welcome
a
to
brand new
2020.
intro.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. This is 508. Hey, all you juggalos, libertarians, eclectic change makers, and passionate Worcesterites. It's January the 29th, 2020, and this is 508, a show about Worcester. Worcester's weekly good faith survey of evidence. I'm Mike Benedetti. This is Brendan Milliken. I've been out of town the last couple of weeks, so I'm behind on the last few episodes of Worcester, Massachusetts.
It's okay. We paused the show while you were gone.
I mean, I feel like there was a season premiere, though. I'm looking at the headlines. Some things have happened.
A couple things happened.
I mean, I was thinking for this week for Worcester in 60 seconds, I would just read some Telegram and Gazette headlines that caught my eye, and I'm not going to comment on these. Here we go. Let me set the timer for the show. Oh, we're so polished in 2020. Here it is. Worcester school enrollment sees biggest decline in 12 years. Worcester student suspension rates continue to go down. Plan to move welfare office in Worcester gets pushback. Green Island neighbors say Crompton Park is wrong for skateboard park. Attempted murder charged in stabbing outside Worcester smoke shop. Despite drop in homelessness, advocates say work must be constant. Worcester Roman Catholic Diocese reports nearly $1.5 million deficit. Property transfer puts YWCA on track for Worcester tax deal. Skymark Tower owner buys nearly 3 nearby parcels for $1 million.
Exciting stuff.
Any of this stuff grabbing you?
Yeah, just more a critique of local media, if you will, as that continues to circle the drain. I read the story, the Crompton Park neighbors complaining about the skate park over there. It really, if you read the story, it's impossible, or the stories that I saw covered anyways, it's impossible not to have it stand out to you that it is not Crompton Park neighbors, plural, but a Crompton Park neighbor.
Okay.
I don't know why would it, if you're a journalist or you're covering a story, why would you feel the need to puff it up a little bit, as opposed to saying, "Hey, look, there's another man yelling at a cloud over here, and we're gonna fill some pages with that."
Well, in this case, looks like this person in the article is saying that they are speaking on behalf of others. So you could say Crompton Park.
Often I speak on behalf of the others in my head, right? Like, I mean, that doesn't give it any sort of great validity. That's not, yeah.
Well, anyway, it is a little bit, yeah.
But it was a bummer to read anyways, though, because folks both on the city side and the skateboarding community have put a lot of effort into this project, and it's kind of a bummer to see it start getting derailed on nonsense complaints that don't even match up with reality.
I'll tell you something that I found actually was a pretty interesting article. Despite drop in homelessness, advocates say work must be constant. So Cyrus Moulton, A, thank you for writing this good article. B, this is a dumb headline. Nobody's going to be like, oh yeah, homelessness is down 5%. And so everybody's like, who cares about it?
Boys.
We're quitting working on homelessness. That's the end. Brendan, we cured a guy with cancer. What are we doing any more cancer research or treatment? It's a waste of time.
Off to coronaviruses.
But man, these numbers are gigantic. This is over the last year, and this is I think that this is based on like the point in time survey that they do every year, where they look on one night in January, and they say how many people are sleeping outside, and or how many people were otherwise homeless in the city, and it's sort of a fascinating. Especially like the number of people outside. The number of people who are legit sleeping outside in the city of Worcester is usually like the low double digits. It's like usually less than 20. But there are, on the coldest day of the year, like 10, 15, 20 people sleeping in the woods in Worcester, which is nuts. But compared to 2018, these drops are huge from 2018 to 2019. It's showing 2018 to 2019, but for some reason... This is very strange. They should have the number from 2020 here, I guess. Anyway, from 2018 to 2019, not this past year, but the previous year, we saw the number of homeless in the state down 8%, the number of homeless people in the county down 14%, and the number of homeless people in the city down 19%. And there's a little bit of speculation in this article as to why this might be. One obvious thing you could say is like, well, the economy's been good. And the economy being good is the kind of thing that affects people, whether people are like homeless and can afford housing and whatever. But man, like 20% in a year is gigantic. The economy's
Yeah.
not like that good. It's not like gold coins are raining down from heaven.
Do you, I mean, you spend a fair amount of time working with folks in and out of homelessness.
Sure.
Do you feel that the method they use to track those numbers is appropriate? Like if you're going to just pick a day and say, hey, we're going to count people today.
Yeah,
Like,
I
is
think
that
so. I think so. I mean, whenever you're talking about how many people are homeless in Worcester, and you want to get technical about it, right? You got to start coming up with like technical definitions for things. And so
Mhm.
you got to start saying, well, how do you draw the line? That's just because you want to have numbers that you can compare year to year. And so, you could say that some of this stuff is arbitrary, and you could say that not all this stuff is super accurate. It seems reasonable enough to me. Honestly, when I think about the mustard seed, the number of people that we've had eating at the mustard seed has gone down
Huh.
measurably in the last year and a half. Even as the mustard seed itself, I think, has become a much calmer and better run establishment. I mean, it's not like the mustard seed has gone to hell and people were leaving because of that.
Right.
And so seeing that there's like 20% less homeless, I mean, not everybody who eat there is homeless, but like there's a correlation there. So,
So maybe that's a better question to ask. Like you personally at the mustard seed and being a presence in the city, you get to know who some of these people are coming and going over the course of, from week to week.
were you going to ask a question, Bruce?
I was going to ask you a question. Apologies to anyone who managed to stay with us while we cut out there. So like at the mustard seed, like you must see people come and go over time and whatnot. You're not getting the sense people are just disappearing, right? We're not like seeing some sort of like a nefarious plan like in LA or New York City where they're just putting people on planes or buses shipping folks out of town, because it is a substantial drop. Are you able to get the sense that like somebody who stopped showing up the mustard seed on a regular basis, you see them 6 months later and hey, maybe something good happened in their life and they don't need that particular service again. Like it.
I mean, that happens all the time. Like all the time, I will not see somebody for 6 months or even a year and a half. And then I say, hey, Brendan, I haven't seen you for 6 months. I mean, I always usually say, is this for positive reasons or negative
Right.
reasons? Because half the time you're like, well, hey, like I got a job, I got housing, I got, I'm staying with my brother and doing this and that. And I just came back through town and just to say hi. And then half the time it's like, yeah, I've been in jail for something,
I guess that's what goes back to why I was asking if you think that the method they use for counting the homeless population is valid, because it's. I mean, obviously, it sounds similar to the census, right? Like the methodology is sound, except
Sure.
in the case of the census, we have known addresses that we can go to or hypothetical locations where people might be able to live that we can go to. In this case, it seems we're relying upon a group of people assuming they know where the city's homeless population is and where they should be looking. It strikes me as there's a much greater room for error in that case.
There may be. I mean, if there's problems with it, I'm not knowledgeable enough to be
Yeah.
able to judge those problems. Yeah, anyway, I thought that was cool. I mean, we also see that this article, attempted murder charged in stabbing outside Worcester smoke shop. I mean, I don't know. That's just a bad corner. That's been a bad corner no matter what business has been there. I don't know that mentioning that it's outside the smoke shop is relevant. I don't know. If I was the smoke shop, I would be frustrated. I would feel defamed. I mean, I don't know anything about this murder. I wasn't stabbed, nor did I try to stab anybody. So
Nor do
for
you
all I
smoke.
know, it's all about the smoke shop. Yeah. Anyway, we have. It's something else we could comment on. We talked about this in the past. Worcester Roman Catholic Diocese reports nearly $1.5 million deficit.
Mm-hmm.
And last year we also saw a deficit, unsurprisingly, or maybe surprisingly, but unsurprisingly. Like I'm looking at 2018 versus 2019. What am I noticing in 2019 versus 2018? Well, we ordained 3 priests in 2019, and as far as I can tell, according to this paper, maybe none in 2018. So that's like a good non-financial change.
I'm going to assume that the compensation package for those priests, though, is nowhere near $1.5 million.
I no, I mean,
Okay.
you know, like what do we see when we look at this 2019? Well, one thing that we see is we see that the donations are uh, are somewhat lower. The annual appeal donations are somewhat lower in this year than last year. Although then there's also this thing about last year has a little line less uncollected pledges, and this year doesn't have this. So maybe it's a little lower in part because they're just rolling the uncollected part into the total collected part, and thus making the total collected part a little bit lower. I don't know. I look at these things and all I realize is like why I'm not a CPA, because I can read them until I cannot read them anymore. I mean, like, and even the Telegram and Gazette article on this is somewhat frustrating. It sort of echoes what the little summary here says, but it doesn't give like a lot of other uh, context for it, man. Like, I mean, a lot of there's a big deficit in the Catholic schools in Worcester, and they're
Yeah.
consolidating some schools, and that consolidation may be on the scale that it gets things.
That's going to be really
Back
interesting
in
to
the
watch, too. I
black.
mean, the consolidation of St. Peter Marian High School and Holy Name High School, which is going to start as soon as the beginning of next school year.
Yes.
That's the plan, to have that together.
Tell me why that will be interesting.
Well, I think it's going to be one of those times where it's almost like shutting a church, and like we've seen happen a
Yes.
couple times in the last few years, where um, the diocese makes the decision to shutter a facility because like nobody's going, right? Like attendance is way low, or huge infrastructure issues, but because the attendance has decreased so much, it doesn't make sense to keep up with those infrastructure issues and whatnot. So we're going to shutter a church. But that's also when you see like the emotional attachment come out. And I mean, you're talking about high
Yes.
schools, like in a city that is still a little bit behind the curve in terms of higher education attainment. And high school means a lot to people, and your allegiance to a high school. And Holy Name
Sure.
and St. Peter's are two huge forces in the high school system around here,
Mhm.
and they're obviously the two Catholic high schools run by the diocese in Worcester. It's kind of funny just in my Facebook feed, like watching the folks that went to either bickering over which school should be the one to absorb the other and what have you. Um, but yeah, I mean, it speaks to a bunch. I think the bigger issue, which an article like this, I think it almost gives you the opportunity or a way to skirt around presenting the obvious, which is there are fewer people engaged in the thing that is struggling, and that's kind of why it's struggling at the end of the day, right? Like overall, you're not creating a lot of new generations of people coming into the Catholic Church. The numbers overall are decreasing on the younger end of things.
Yes.
You're going to see that obviously on the education side of things more than anything else. I feel like the problem with a story like this, it almost presents it as a mystery. Like we have no idea what's going on here. It's we're in the hole. We can't figure it out. It's because people aren't engaging in your activity
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, and that's true. I mean, I'll say this though is that like in this specifically is talking about the diocese. It's not necessarily talking about all of the constituent parishes who have some of them are doing good and
Some
some
of them
of
are
them are
doing
not
great.
doing
Yeah.
good. But they are not on this balance sheet. This is like they interact with this balance sheet,
Mhm.
and that the diocese expects some money from them and gives them money or loans them money whenever things are going bad for them. Um, but yeah, so this isn't like the Catholic Church in Worcester. This is one level of the Catholic Church in Worcester.
Mhm.
Um, so in that case, like you could see a place where like the parishes were not doing so great because Catholic Church attendance is not doing so great, but that the diocese was being run on the bishop's level was being run spectacularly fiscally responsibly, and so the diocese was actually doing great
Mhm.
every year. So those things are probably connected, but they don't have to be that tightly connected. One thing this makes me think about is I'm going to bring up the clergy abuse scandals, even though I mean, it's not an unrelated issue, but it's a little bit crazy to. It's kind of like bringing up the Holocaust. It's a pretty extreme thing to bring up, but back in the '80s, I believe, there was a bunch of Catholic laymen, influential Catholic laymen, who put together a confidential report to the U.S. bishops saying, it seems like we have some clergy abuse problems. It seems like we have a lot of clergy abuse problems. and maybe the time to take action is now, and start to do things like while they can still be done on our terms, because otherwise this is going to be a real mess. It'd be or I should say, it's going to be a real mess, and nobody wants to pull this particular Band-Aid off. This is a Band-Aid covering like 90% of your body. But let me tell you, you don't pull this Band-Aid off, you're not going to like it when in 20 years it's covering 99% of your body and somebody else pulls that Band-Aid off. And,
Sure.
and so it came to pass. You understand in part why there's a lot of reasons they didn't do that. In this case, you have to wonder about if you were a bishop and you didn't have a lot of emotional attachment to the diocese, what would like your blue sky solution be? What would your solution be if you could just be a bishop and tell people what to do and they would just do what you said because it was a hierarchical organization? If you didn't have to worry about oh, people will be upset if you close this school. Would you have closed this school 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Would you close half the parishes? Now, would you close 10% of the parishes now? Like there's a lot of decisions where you're making something which is not a long-term or even a medium-term smart financial decision, because you got to have the Catholics of the diocese more or less behind you, not in complete revolt. And so you can't do stuff like shut down parishes and do things that people have a lot of emotional attachment to just because it's going to help make your finances better. But man, I had to think it would make both finances better and make the organization stronger if you could just make those changes. If you could just say, we have way too many facilities for the number of people that we're dealing with, and let's just close a bunch of them. But, again, you can't do that.
The emotional attachment makes that hard. But what's interesting, I think, if you look at the two big deficit lines here, that kind of gets you to the overall problem deficit, it is the deficit caused by the Catholic schools, which is 1.1 million, and the deficit caused by priest retirements. You look at those two things, it's not too dissimilar from any other organization that is struggling and retracting in terms of where their liabilities start hurting them more than anything else. To your point, there are fewer people seeking Catholic education. Right? You don't have to like that, and you don't have to agree with it. It's just a simple matter of fact that since the economy downturn around 2008 or so, people paying for private religious education has decreased substantially. And then also you've got, you just made a mention when you're opening this up about how, hey, we brought 3 new priests online and didn't do that the year before. It's supporting priests in retirement is getting more expensive.
Well,
and
actually,
there's fewer funds coming in to support the priests that are already in retirement.
I'll say this. The fact that that's a big part of the balance sheet is
underfunded
probably
pension
a sign
liabilities,
that
right?
the fact that that's a large part of the balance sheet is a sign that it's a large part of what's going on. But that deficit actually was worse last year. It's gotten a lot better.
So then the school side would be the more significant.
The school side would seem to be the more significant thing. Again, I can barely understand what's going on some of this stuff, so I don't know how.
The school side is important too, because I feel like a lot of the Catholic education in Worcester County, if you go back a full generation, from its outset until about a generation ago, it was targeted working class Catholic folks. It was a reasonably priced sort of education opportunity.
Yeah,
that's changed a lot in the sense that those folks are either, when you look at the numbers, right, you have a lot of private schools to choose from if private school is where you want to be headed. And also you've got a lot of people who are just staying in the public schools, which you're going to hit me with that in the next story, pointing out that our enrollment in the public schools is way down as well.
There.
But it's when you look at the Catholic schools, the ones that don't seem to be struggling, and they're all struggling, relatively speaking, when you look at the ones that don't seem to be struggling as bad, it seems as though they've made a change to be more like a preparatory school, not necessarily secondary to the fact that they're a Catholic, they're providing a Catholic education, but that the focus is more drawing from a wider pool. And being more competitive beyond just say the working class, the middle class throughout Worcester County.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say one one last thing on this, which is, just to reiterate, this is not Catholic. This is not a balance sheet for Catholic Worcester. And when you look at, of all these, however it is, what's the total on here? $20 million or something? I don't know. you know, Catholic Charities is like $350,000 of this. But things like, and you think like, well, that's actually not that much money. That's like seven people, seven
Yep.
salaries, people, seven salaries for people. But things like St. John's Food for the Poor or
Hmm.
any of these other large Catholic charity things that you have going on in the city, this isn't on
Right,
this.
right,
This
right.
is that's a nonprofit which is associated with the parish, and neither the parish's finances nor that nonprofit's finances are on this. So there's a lot of organizations like that, and a lot of those organizations actually are doing pretty good. Like um, this is not true of the mustard seed, let me be clear, but I'm associated with other non-diocesan local Catholic
Yeah.
organizations who all the time get checks in the mail, which is like, the bishop can go to hell. Here's some money,
Yeah.
and like this is part of the deal is that people hate the bishops. I
Yeah.
mean, the people who hate the bishops the least are the bishops, but the bishops also hate the bishops.
Right.
But everybody hates the bishops.
Hmm.
And so like they're always, they do stuff like they put like a picture of Mother Teresa or whatever on the bishop's appeal
Hmm.
for the diocesan funding thing here. They even change it from like the bishop's appeal at some point because they're just like, oh, forget it.
Right.
Don't bring that guy into it. It's no reflection on Robert McManus. Like whoever else they put in here, people would hate because he was the Catholic Bishop of Worcester in 2020.
Right.
The people are just so frustrated with things on that level. I mean, look at stuff like Mount Carmel. Like there's however many thousand people in the city of Worcester who have an emotional attachment to that church who would presumably kick in a few bucks
Right.
for the bishop, who are just like, you know what, I would kick in money if it would send the bishop straight to hell. Other than that, I'm not interested in any diocesan things involving the bishop.
I'd be really curious too, because I mean, you mentioned sex abuse in liabilities. Briefly, you mentioned that there are so many other things too that the diocese or the bishops, I should say, not the Worcester diocese, but the bishops themselves have gotten involved in politically. That over the last decade, they're always on the losing side of, but they're very public about their involvement in. So when you look at like marijuana, right? Like you're spending $1 million you're basically spending our deficit in Worcester to oppose ballot questions on legalizing weed, right? Or spending money on opposing like the right to die bill that we or a ballot question that we had some time back in Massachusetts. It seems as though, to your point, that the send the bishop to hell contingent, it's very possible that they're just getting frustrated that the diocese, and not just the Worcester diocese, all the collective dioceses just aren't speaking for them anymore from a political perspective as well, which, if I'm not mistaken, weren't they supposed to not be speaking to anybody or for anybody on a political perspective? But that's neither here nor there.
I was thinking about as far as sex abuse stuff on here. Like
I looked as well. I couldn't find
I see
a
Office
legal.
for Healing and Prevention, Office of Healing and Prevention. Man, I don't know enough about the diocese honestly to be talking about this. As everybody who knows about the diocese has been screaming this whole episode,
Do you
I
happen to have
assume
a
Office of Healing and Prevention, $170,000. That's got to be stuff involving sex abuse prevention.
any idea what the balance sheet for Scientology looks like?
I don't have any idea. No, I'll say also
We need to bring that. We need to compare and contrast, because I think this is further proof that one of us needs to get up and start a cult, because people still need something to believe in, Mike. I just don't think this is the thing that they need to believe in anymore.
We have like we also have like, I don't know, something like $1 million. Sorry, why did I even start talking about this? There's also a big chunk of money in here that has to do with like servicing loans. And I'm not going to be able to find this to say how big this chunk of money is. The church is $164,000 in legal. That's Mount Carmel. I mean, it also just mentions that Mount Carmel is just like a total disaster area financially. Our Lady of Mount Carmel, and that merged parish, Our Lady of Mount Carmel, plus Our Lady of Mount Loretto, featuring Our Lady of Mount Loretto, is not doing great. Anyway, that's the I don't know. It drives me crazy. I'll tell you what drives me crazy. I'll tell you something where I can totally like critique these reports, which is that I am smart. I'm smart enough,
Mhm.
Brendan. I know how to read these balance sheets basically.
Mhm.
I have done correspondence study courses in accounting and done fine on them. I know math. Um, I understand something about how the Catholic Church works in Worcester. And yet I can look at this and I can read your little summary letter, bro, to dear friends in Christ. I hope I'm your friend in Christ. I feel like I am. I don't understand based on reading your letter what's going on.
Yeah.
Like you tell me stuff. It's not like it's all empty words. This is all talking about stuff, but none of this stuff is like executive summary. Here's what's up financially. And maybe it's just because the situation is complicated, which forget it. I don't want to hear that. I want you to tell me like oversimplifying the situation, comma, this is what's up financially.
The diocese is in need of a bailout, Mike.
I
Vatican,
don't know.
get on that.
I mean, the Vatican is probably in need of a bailout, man. Yeah. You know, Brendan, Brent crude oil is $60 a barrel, down 7% on the week and down 1% on the year. Bitcoin is $9,300, up 9% on the week and up 172% on the year.
If only we could run our cars on Bitcoin, Mike.
If only we could run our cars on Bitcoin. Man, I don't even know what the like. I feel like the just looking at these headlines, I feel like the plot line in the early season of 2020 for this television program, the Worcester television program, not the 508 program, is that we're just kind of like giving a sense of normalcy, like it may be a false sense of normalcy, but it's like a sense of normalcy. It's like, oh, the diocese is losing money still. This is happening, that's happening. People want to build a skate park someplace, and then everybody who lives nearby is like, no, don't build anything anywhere, don't do any of this kind of stuff. People want to move the welfare office. No, don't do this. And that, but then you know what's gonna? I mean, like next week, like it's gonna happen. You know, like not Mike O'Brien, like maybe Mike O'Brien will come back.
Mike O'Brien can come back. They're going to
A,
break
that
ground
could
on the
happen.
skate park, and
I'm
they're going to open up a portal to another dimension. That's
I'm gonna say Ed Augustus's evil twin, Abraham Lincoln Augustus, or maybe his good twin, Abraham Lincoln Augustus, is gonna come on the show, and we're gonna be like, Ed Augustus has a twin, has a shadow side twin. We had no idea. He has bad hair. He's short. He has a different governance style. He's a poor public speaker, but yet,
and through it all, Gary Rosen will remain.
Gary Rosen doesn't have. I mean, Gary Rosen doesn't have a shadow side. Gary Rosen is a very integrated individual. You can say one thing for that man.
Yeah. Any word on Gary's plan to make the buses free? You got any updates on that one?
He's on the WRTA advisory board now officially, so maybe it could happen. I don't know. Maybe it could happen. Yeah. Have you been enjoying 2020 so far?
I've slept through most of it so far.
Has there been a lot of snow?
About what's outside right now. Yeah, while you were gone, we got a couple inches.
Yeah.
Then we melted it.
I mean, as I was hanging out in tropical, beautiful Puerto Rico, I was getting these texts from the city, which were like, the city shut down due to snow or whatever. And every time I would just be like,
Did you have a rental car while you were down there?
We did have a rental car.
So that would be really fun. That's what we should ask all Worcester residents to do that. Like, so if you're on vacation, you have a rental car, and you get a text message about a winter parking ban, observe the ban wherever you happen to be in the world. So, like, if you just that'd be really fun for you just to start screwing with folks in Puerto Rico by observing the winter parking ban.
People are like, there's a parking spot over there on the left side of the street, and it's like, no, I'm from Worcester. We don't do that. Not today.
You're in the middle of Puerto Rico. You start
today.
putting like a chair out in the middle of the road to hold your space. That's
that wouldn't work.
That's how we should spread Worcester around the world.
Only Worcester
chairs and parking.
I feel
spots.
like only Worcester's crazy enough that people tolerate that chair nonsense. Anywhere else?
Have you ever been to Boston?
Do they do the chairs in Boston?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it's militant out there. Like people like fight over them.
I shouldn't say only Worcester's crazy enough. I should say only Massachusetts is crazy enough. Maybe for that.
Providence probably a little bit too.
The stupid chair thing. Yeah, I don't know. I feel I feel a positive. Like I feel a positive vibe. Just like seeing the lack of total chaos over the last 2 weeks. Like I feel a positive vibe about that. It's interesting being down in Puerto Rico, where obviously they're still recovering from hurricane damage. There's been just like a crazy number of earthquakes in Puerto Rico over the last month, like hundreds of measurable earthquakes, and a handful of damaging earthquakes. There was a 5.0 while I was there that knocked out the power where we were staying. Which is not like woe is me, but was like wow, like there's just this ongoing infrastructural damage happening. And in some ways, it reminded me of like Worcester and Worcester's continued inability to like not be able to deal with snow.
Been doing it for a while.
Like again, like just like dealing with snow, but it's like, man, like it just feels it's like if you were imagine a tropical country where every time it rained they had to shut down the schools.
Right.
You would be like, you guys gotta get some umbrellas or some roofs or something. You can't you can't not have a society that's like that. But Worcester remains a place where every time there's a significant snowfall, it's like a miniature crisis.
We're at the point, I think, where you can make the argument we were better off with snow when the way we dealt with it was like a bunch of guys in tweed coats and like half-broken farm equipment just went out to the street and like cleared it all up themselves with shovels. There was no municipal snow removal. It seemed like there was a more efficient way of getting things done.
Honestly, this is probably, I mean, this may be the kind of thing, maybe a little bit related to climate change in that maybe the ultimate solution involves us having the technological option to pick a good solution. That maybe we're not there yet, and that battery and motor technology continuing to advance. At some point, Tesla is just going to come out with this really sweet, like
snow Roomba,
like this $2,000 snow Roomba.
Yeah,
and it's just basically going to like cruise around your sidewalk of your block and just plow it out in like 2.5 minutes. And the city is just going to buy a couple of these, and it's just going to be a total game changer as far as
if anyone at
snow plowing.
Technocopia is listening, I think that would be a good project that I'd be happy to support in some way, but like a Roomba with a flamethrower on it. Like a flamethrower room, you know.
Well, let me say this. As was pointed out during
a waterproof flamethrower Roomba would be the solution.
So this was like 2 years ago in Boston. You know, I think it was 2 years ago. Was the time when had been so much snowfall that like they were running out of places to put the snow.
It was actually right now. Yeah, it was
5 years ago, and they were running. They were running that big storm where they were like running out of places to put the snow. And I remember the Globe or somebody ran a beautiful article saying like, why not flamethrowers? And you just, if you run the numbers, the answer is that it takes a lot of energy to melt water.
Yeah.
Much more energy than it does to push the water around, even pushing it around for long distances. It just takes the melting, the energy of whatever for water is incredibly high. So even if Elon Musk delivers us our Roomba, snow Roomba, it's not going to involve flamethrowers.
Yeah.
Not even electrical flamethrowers.
But I think that's just a natural way of humans thinking, that whether it be snow removal or war or weed removal, at some point in time, some jackass is going to step up to the mic and say, hey, why not fire? And it's an easy default for it. It was really our first invention, and it's just the one I think it's our go-to when times get tough.
I'm going to try to think in the positive in 2020, and let me just think positive and say, you know what? Just because it doesn't make any sense thermodynamically, doesn't mean you can't do it. You can have the snow Roomba and you can have the little flamethrower on there, and it's really not doing anything. And it's a gigantic waste of time and energy, but it's pretty sweet, and it helps people want to buy it more if it has a flamethrower on it. So sure,
it'll totally help.
On there.
It'll help keep the raccoons away from your garbage when you break the rules and put that out the night before trash pickup instead of the morning of.
I just realized this Tesla Calliope.
Yeah,
why not? Where is that?
Yeah,
where's that? All right. Man, this show is just can get dumb at times.
We were done 25 minutes ago, Mike.
That's all for this episode. We'll see you next time. And we have a special guest next time. It's going to be a very exciting show. We'll see you next time. And remember, Worcester, you can bench more than you think you can.